Yeah, that was straight out of an action movie. Die. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to UT3D Tutorials, and this is FPS 1.41. So, I've gotten a lot of requests to do enemy health and basically make the enemies killable. And I thought, yes, that is very essential to a video game. You really need to be able to kill the enemies. But that would be a very boring tutorial. That's one variable. That's basically if enemy health is smaller than 0, destroy game object. So I figured I'd spice things up and add Ragdoll physics. And not only that, I'm going to be adding bullet force. So that means that if you shoot an enemy somewhere in their body, like their head or their chest, not only are they going to die, but their body is also going to go limp and fall on the floor and actually have realistic ragdoll physics to them. But also when you shoot them, the bullet is going to add force to that enemy. So if you shoot them in the head, their head's going to fly backwards. And you know, you guys have probably played Call of Duty and games like that. When you shoot somebody, they always fly backwards just a little bit. Just like in action movies and all that. I really don't think that's realistic, but it's really cool and really fun to play with. So yeah, it's not too much code, but it is a little bit complicated. But yes, let's jump right into it because I'm really excited about this tutorial and I really want to add this to the FPS1 engine because it makes it so fun. I'm pretty sure one reason why this episode has been delayed a little bit is because I have just been having so much fun just playing with the ragdoll physics and just shooting dead bodies, and it's just been a lot of fun. So let's jump right into it and learn how this whole thing works. Alright, so first of all, let's modify the enemy body script. So we're only going to be adding two variables, and the first variable is enemy health. Now the reason why I called it enemy health as opposed to just plain health is that I've noticed in the past, I used to use Game Maker, and I'm not sure if Unity does this, but I know a lot of game engines really like to have health be a default variable, which is a little bit annoying to me because I don't know the properties of that health. I don't know what it affects in the game, outside of the game. Is it a public variable? Is it a private variable? Whatever. So I'm just going to create my own variable that I know is not inside of the engine. I really don't know if health is inside of the Unity engine. Leave a comment below if just the word health is inside of the Unity engine somewhere. I researched it a little bit, but I was lazy and I didn't really find it. But anyways, so I'm going to be calling this enemy health, and for now I'm just going to have it be a variable of 1, but you can set that to a higher variable if you want. We're also going to be able to adjust the amount of damage that the bullets do. So yeah, so that is just the health of the enemy. When it reaches 0, the enemy dies. The next variable is an array, and it is a rigid body, or of type rigid body. And the variable is called rigid bodies, plural. So this is going to be saving all of the rigid bodies that are going to be the ragdoll. So this means depending on how complicated your character is and how many parts there are to your character, this could be the hand, the forearm, the upper arm, bicep, I guess, the torso, the head, the legs, the upper leg, the lower leg, the feet. I don't know. There's a lot of different body parts that you could split up the body into. So depending on how complicated the enemy is, you're going to have multiple of these. In this case, I think we're going to have just, I split it up into head, torso, leg, arm, and arm. So it's a really, really simple version of an enemy. You're probably going to want a few more than that, but just for the sake of time and just demonstrating to you how this works, I'm just having a very, very simple enemy. So this is going to just be an array, and we're going to set this up in the inspector, and it is going to remember all of the rigid bodies that are all of those different parts. And we want to turn those on when the enemy is dead, because we don't want those on while the enemy is alive. It's actually pretty comical when the rigid bodies are on when the enemy is alive, because the enemy still tries to navigate through the level, but they're just dead, and they just kind of, their body just drags on the ground. It's actually really funny. I'll show you it in the screen recording. But anyways, so we are going to turn the rigid bodies on when the enemy is actually dead, so they go into ragdoll mode when they are actually dead. Alright, and we're not going to be throwing anything inside of function awake, and let's jump right down into the only thing that we're going to be adding inside of function awake, or function update, the update loop. So first of all, we have an if statement, and that is if enemy health is smaller than or equal to 0, and I have this variable here which does not need to be there. That was a mistake on my part. But anyways, so we have one condition for this whole if statement, and that is if enemy health is smaller than or equal to 0. Basically, if the enemy health is smaller than or equal to 0, we are ready to kill the enemy and make them die. So we are first of all going to be throwing a for loop inside here. Now this for loop might look a little bit different from our for loops in the past, and that is because there are no squiggly brackets on it, because there is only one line of code that we really need. So it's just like a regular for loop, but there's no brackets because there's only one line of code. I just wanted to point that out. So for var rigid body for in rigid bodies. So we are looking at one particular rigid body at a time inside of the array variable rigid bodies. So remember, rigid bodies is saving all of the rigid bodies that are the different parts, so torso, head, arm, etc., etc. And we are going to be swapping that through a variable called rigid body 4. Now I called it rigid body 4 because rigid body is definitely already a part of the Unity engine, so I needed to add a little bit of something there to make sure that it didn't interfere with any other variables inside of the Unity engine, so I called it rigid body 4. And so every time we go through this for loop, which is just this one line of code, we're going to do rigid body 4 dot is kinematic equal false. I don't know how that word is pronounced. Is it cinematic, kinematic? Kinematic? I don't know. But basically, if is kinematic true, that basically means that that rigid body is frozen and not active. So we want to set that to false so that all of these different parts of the enemy do have physics and they flop to the ground like a ragdoll. Next, what we are going to do is we are going to set animation.enabled equal false. So we're accessing the animation that is attached to the game object that this script is attached to, in other words, the enemy body, and we're going to do .enabled equals false. Now, the variable enabled, basically, I don't know if you guys have seen this inside of the inspector, but for all of the different parts, or at least most of the different parts, like the renderer, the box collider, or any other kind of collider, or animation, or scripts, there's a little checkbox next to it where you can just turn it off, and basically that kind of like just pretends that that component has been removed, but it really hasn't been removed. So basically .enabled is that little checkbox. So in this case, we are just turning the animation off because we don't need the enemy trying to walk when it is dead. And then we are going to do parent script.enabled equal false. Now parent script is the enemy movement script that its parent had, or when it was its parent. And then we are going to set enabled to false just to turn that script off so that the enemy stops trying to navigate its way through the level because it's dead. It doesn't need to find its way through the level because it's dead. And then we're going to do enabled equal false. So when we don't write anything and we try to access something like enabled out of nothing, basically this is the equivalent of writing this dot enabled, but we don't need that. So when we just write enabled by itself, we are talking about this as in the script, the enemy body script. So we are just going to turn that off, and that is our last line of code inside of the enemy body script. And basically after all of this, we have ragdoll physics. Well, I mean, we also need to set up our enemy and create the joints and rigid bodies and set that all up correctly inside of the inspector and the Unity interface. But this is all of the code that we need inside of the enemy body script. Now, this is all really cool, but the only problem is that when you shoot the enemy, they just go limp and they fall to the ground. Now, this might be okay for something like a laser or poison, or I don't know, something with no force to it, but something like a bullet or a shotgun or something that should have some impact and really make the enemy like fly backwards. nothing's going to happen yet because we need to code that and we need to actually give the bullet force. So let's take a look at how to do that. Alright, now let's take a look at a new script that we're going to be adding called the enemy body part script. So this is going to be a script that we're going to be adding to all of the different enemy body parts. So this is going to be the torso, the head, the arms, the legs, all the different body parts. The first variable that we have inside of the enemy body part script is enemy body. So this is going to basically be a way for the bullets to know what the enemy body is, or what particular game object it is, because right now they're going to do a raycast and then they're going to check the tag, and if the tag is enemy body part, they're not going to know exactly which enemy body part of which enemy that is, and they don't know which enemy to apply damage to. So what's going to happen is if it has the tag enemy body part, it is going to access the enemy body part script, and then it is going to pull out the variable enemy body out of that so that it knows where to apply the damage. Next we have a variable called add force vector, and it is of type vector3. So this is going to be a variable. Basically, the way it's going to work is instead of adding force directly to the rigid bodies that are attached to all of these different body parts from the bullet, we're going to have the bullet save the force that it wants to add to all of those different body parts, or which body part it hits, inside of the variable add force vector. The reason why we do this is because if you have the killing shot on an enemy and you kill that enemy and you want the enemy to fly backwards, we're going to add force to that enemy body parts. But the only problem is that is kinematic is going to be set to true until the enemy is actually fully dead. And the enemy can't be dead until they get shot with that final bullet. So we need to wait about 1 frame afterwards for the force to actually be applied and for those rigid bodies to actually be enabled and be able to take that force. So we're going to save it inside of a variable called add force vector, and then add force vector is going to be added to the rigid bodies of these enemy body parts as soon as they actually can. So let's take a look at what's going to be inside of function update. First of all, we have an if statement, which is if add force vector does not equal vector3 dot 0. So add force vector, I just explained what that does. And if it does not equal vector3 dot 0, and vector3 dot 0 is short for vector3 0 0 0, or by default the default vector3 when we don't assign it to anything. So if it is 0, then we are not going to run all of this stuff. But if it is not 0, then we know that a bullet hit the enemy and that the enemy body part actually wants to move. So if it is not 0, and if enemy body dot get component enemy body script dot enabled is false. So we have the exclamation mark to show that if it is false. So we are basically, we know that if the enemy body script is not enabled, or enabled is set to false, that means that the enemy is dead. And if the enemy is dead, then we can go ahead and add force to the enemy body part, because the enemy has either just died and just got shot with a bullet, or the enemy is already dead on the ground, and we still want to add force to the enemy when they're just limp and dead on the ground. So if it is not enabled, we know the enemy is dead, and if it is not 0, then we know that there is force to add. So then we will run these next few lines of code. And the first line is if rigid body. So we're testing to make sure that there is a rigid body attached to the game object that is this game object. I just lost my train of thought. But anyways, so we're just checking to make sure that we have a rigid body, and if we don't have a rigid body, or else, we're going to access the parent and do the exact same thing, which is rigid body.add force vector. We're going to do that to the parent. So, like I said, rigid body.add force vector, because we know that add force vector is the saved force that we want to add to the rigid body as soon as it is possible. And if we don't have a rigid body, we know that the parent of this game object is going to have a rigid body. So we're going to do transform.parent.rigidbody.addForce vector. And then after all of those, depending on either way, whether we run this line of code or we run this line of code, we're still going to run this line of code after those two, which is add force vector equal vector3.0, or basically we're going to set add force vector back to 0 so that it is ready to be shot again and add more force to it. Alright, now let's take a look at what we're going to be adding inside of the bullet script. So we're going to be adding only two variables, and the first variable is damage. So this is pretty self-explanatory. This is just the amount of damage that is going to be applied to the enemies, or the amount that we are going to be taking away from the variable enemy health. The next variable we have is bullet force, and this is going to be the amount of force that is going to be applied to all of those different body parts. So the larger the number, the more the enemy is going to fly backwards. The smaller the number, the less the enemy is going to fly backwards. So if you have something like a really small pistol, you might want to set this to something like 500. If you have something more along the lines of like a shotgun or a high-powered sniper rifle, you're going to want to have this set to something like 5,000. But anyways, you can adjust this accordingly and make it customizable to your weapon, or more specifically, the ammo type that your weapon has. Now let's take a look at what we're going to be putting inside of the function update loop, and it is all going to go inside of this if statement right here. And that if statement is if hit.transform.tag equal enemy body part. So we're going to be adding a tag to all of the enemy body parts to know that they are all enemy body parts, so that when we are raycasting and we are checking the hit variable and we are checking the tag of that hit variable, we know what we are hitting, and if it is enemy body part, we are going to run through all of these lines of code here. Now let's take a look at the first if statement that is inside of this if statement, and that is this if statement right here, which is really long, but it's really only one condition. So we're going to do if hit.transform.getComponent enemy body part script dot enemy body dot get component enemy body script dot enemy health is larger than damage. Okay, so basically we are just checking to see how much health that enemy has left, and if it is larger than damage, we're just going to add damage to that enemy, whereas we just have else. So the only thing else it can be is either equal to or smaller than, and if it is equal to or smaller than, we know that that bullet is enough to kill that enemy, so we actually want to add force to that enemy. So let's take a look at this if statement one more time. So first of all, hit, this is the variable we get back from the raycast. So this is the raycast hit variable, and then we're going to access the transform from that. So the transform of the game object that the raycast hit. So this can either be a leg or a torso or a head or something along those lines. And we're going to access the transform from that. And then we can do get component from the transform, because get component is an inherited function from the game object class. So basically we can do .get component from transform the exact same way that we do get component from the variable type game object. And we're going to get the components enemy body part script, because we know everything with a tag of enemy body part is also going to have this script attached to it. And that script is going to have the variable enemy body inside of that, and enemy body is going to save the enemy body, basically, or the script that has the health in it. So we're going to do .get component enemy body part, or enemy body script, and then .enemy health, so we're accessing the health from that. So basically this whole long thing is just figuring out the health of the particular enemy that we just shot. And if it is larger than damage, we know that this bullet is not enough to kill it, so we don't want to add force yet. So we are going to write the whole exact same thing right here, which is the line of code that is going to be run if this condition is true. So we're going to do the exact same line So we're going to use this to access the health from the enemy. And we're just going to do minus equal damage, and we're going to take damage away from enemy health. Now we have else after this if statement. So if the enemy health is smaller than or equal to damage, so if that bullet is enough to kill that enemy, not only do we want to minus equal damage from it, but we also want to add force. So we are going to, exact same thing we have up here, hits, oh I don't need to read it off again, we're going to take the amount of damage away from enemy health. And then we have this line of code, which we are going to do hit.transform.getComponent enemy body part script dot add force vector equal transform.forward times bullet force. So we have the raycast hit variable, and then we're going to access the transform, which is going to give us back either a torso, a head, an arm, a leg, or basically an enemy body part. And then we are going to get the enemy body part script from that. And then we are going to save inside of the variable inside of that script, so add force vector. We are going to save the value transform.forward times bullet force. Now transform.forward is a magnitude vector that is going to be pointing in the forward direction of the bullet, and it has a magnitude of 1. So we can multiply that vector 3 by bullet force to make sure that we have a force that is proportional to this variable right here in the direction that the bullet is going. So we're going to basically add the force to the enemy. So I think that is all the code that we need to go over today. So now I'm going to cut the green screen and go into Unity and show you how to do that inside of Unity. Alright, here we are inside of Unity. And now let's actually start creating a ragdoll. So I'm going to open up all of these, and I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to enable the box collider on them. And then what else should I add to them? Let's see, these, oops, let's see, the legs, arms, and head. I'm going to go to Component, Physics, Character Joints, and then I'm going to drag and drop the torso into, connected rigid body, which I need to add the rigid bodies first. So I need to select the torso too, and go to Component, Physics, Rigid Body. You cannot add the same component multiple times. Do some of these already have a rigid body attached to them? Apparently the head has a rigid body attached to it already. So now let's select the empties and the torso, and then go to Components, and then Physics, and then Rigid Body. Nope. One of these also has a rigid body attached to it, apparently. Why is that? Okay, head, torso, we need a rigid body, so Physics, rigid body, left arm, oh, this already has a rigid body, and so do all these. Okay, so now I'm going to select all these. So the arm and leg empties and the head, and I'm going to drag and drop torso into the connected body. And then all of the empties should automatically be fine, but I need to adjust the head because, as you can see, the anchor is in the top of the head. So I'm going to go to head, and I'm going to go to anchor, and I'm going to change this to -0.5. And now you can see the anchor is right where we want it to be. So I think all of those are set up just fine. But let me select all the ones that have a rigid body and set is kinematic to true. Please comment below if you know how to pronounce that, because I certainly don't. Alright. And let's see. Oh, we also need to give them tags. So let's select all of them. and new tag. Well, I guess I didn't need to select all of them just yet, but let's call this enemy body part. Now let's select all of these and set it to enemy body part. Awesome. And now they all have the tag of enemy body part. Cool. Now let's modify, or actually let's create the enemy body part script. So enemy body part script. Whoops, script. And let's open that up. And let's take a look at what it looks like over here. So we need the variable enemy body and add force vector. So var enemy body, and was it type game object? I believe it was. Let me double check that. Yes, it was game object. Now var, actually I'm going to do, let's see. I'm going to do the whole add force vector after we actually get the ragdoll working, and then we will add force to the ragdoll. So I'm going to do it in that order. So now let's open up the enemy movement script and double check over here how we're going to be modifying that. So we're just adding two variables, enemy health and rigid bodies. So let's wait, this is the enemy movement script. I want the enemy body script, right? Yes. Okay. So let's go to the enemy body script. And let's add var enemy health float, and let's by default make it 1 so that we can kill them nice and easily. And now we need rigid bodies. And this is going to be of type rigid body square brackets. Okay, and now we need an if statement, which I believe is simply if enemy health is smaller than or equal to 0. Oops. Alright, and I'm going to double check over here what I'm supposed to do inside of there. So we're creating a for loop, and we are turning all of the rigid bodies on when the enemy is dead. So for var rigid body 4 in rigid bodies. It says no matches, but there is a match. Okay, whatever. And we are going to do rigid body 4 dot is kinematic equal false. And I'm going to go over here and check what else I need to add. We're going to disable the parent script. We're going to disable this script, and we're going to disable the animation. So let's start with the animation. So animation dot enabled equal false, and then we're going to do parent script dot enabled equal false, and enabled equal false. So we turned off the animation, we turned off the enemy movement script, and now we are turning off the enemy body script. Cool. So now I think, now we need to edit the bullet script, which I need to pull up through Unity. So let's find the bullet script. And what are we doing in the bullet script? We are adding bullet force, which I will add after once I get the enemy killable, then we will do all the add force. Let's start with just damage. Open up mono develop. So var damage. And this is going to be a float, and let's have it by default equal 1. And I believe now we need an if statement, which is probably if hit dot transform dot tag equal what was it, enemy body part, then let's see if I got that right. Yes, I did. And now we have two conditions right here, and I'm going to go ahead and start with this condition, because I believe that I can just copy and paste that right there, and we don't actually have to worry about whether or not it is taking away damage from, or whether or not this is the killing bullet or a bullet that is just damaging it. So we have hit, the raycast hit, and then we have transform, and then we are going to get the components, because get component is an inherited function of the game object class. So we can get a component from a game object from a transform, just like we would as if this was a game object variable. And we're going to do the enemy body part script, and then we're going to find out what its enemy body is, and then we are going to get the component enemy body script, and then we are going to access health, and then we're going to take damage away from that. So now let's do a little bit more setting up in Unity. So let's go ahead and select all of these, and I'm going to go to component script, enemy body part script, and the enemy body is this dude right here. And let's see, is there anything else? Oh, all the ones that have a rigid body, I did set them all to is kinematic already. So I can't remember if there is something else that I need to do. So let's go ahead and just test it out and see if it works. Alright, so far he's walking pretty normally. And now that zooms in a lot. And he's technically dead. Maybe. Okay, I just figured out what it was. This is a duh moment. But I forgot to assign the array rigid bodies and which rigid bodies to turn back on when the enemy is dead. So we need to set up that array, so let's do that. So we have the leg and arm empties, so that's 4, and then the head and the torso, so that's 6 total. So let's do 6, and we're gonna have to do these all individually. And this is gonna be a pain in the ass if your character has a lot of little joints. But hey, it'll be worth it, right? It'll be cool. Alright, let's turn that on, and now let's see if it's working. Please be working. If I can hit him. Yeah! Die. Die. Well, it looks like it is working. He's properly dead. So now let's do the add force part. So let's open up MonoDevelop and enemy body part script, and now let's create the variable, what was it, add force vector, and this is going to be a vector 3, not 32, vector 3. And I'm drawing a blank. What comes after that? Oh, if the add force vector is not 0 and the enemy body is not enabled. So let's create the if statements. So if, I'm going to clean up my brackets because that's going to annoy me. Okay, so if add force vector does not equal vector 3.0 and enemy body dot get component enemy body script dot enabled. And if that is the case, then we are, oh, that's right. We need to test out to see, okay, so if, how did I do that? If rigid body. So if we have a rigid body, we are going to rigid body dot add force vector, and else transform dot parent dot rigid body dot add force lowercase add force vector. And after all of that, we're going to do the add force vector equal vector 3 dot 0. And I think that's everything that we need inside of that script. Yes, it is. And now let's see. Do we need to add anything inside of? Nope, that script's fine. And we just need to modify the bullet script now. So let's go to the bullet script. And now this is the part where we want to do var, what did I call it? Bullet force. Bullet force float equal, I don't know, 1,000. Let's start with that. What do I have over here? 2,000? We'll do 1,000, whatever. And let's tab that over and create an if statement right here. So if, and it was a long if statement. What was it? Oh, if that whole thing is larger than damage. So I'm going to copy and paste this line, which this long line just gives us the enemy health. So if it is larger than damage, we are going to do that. Else, so if it is smaller than or equal to, and I think we need brackets, then we are going to do this, and we are going to add some force. And let's see, it was, I think we just take this and copy that. So now that gives us the enemy body part that our raycast has hit. And then we set the add force vector equal transform. I can't spell transform dot forward times bullet force. And I think that's it. Let me double check. Yeah, I think that's it. So now let's go into Unity. And I knew there had to have at least been one bug. So transform. Now I think it should be working. Yes. All right, let's give it a shot. Literally. Okay, that wasn't that funny. All right. Fly backwards. Yeah. That was straight out of an action movie. And now I can even shoot his dead body, which shouldn't be as fun as it is. This is what video games have done to our generation. They made us so violent, but it's so awesome. So, yeah. This has been the episode, I guess. It seems like the game is working now. You guys might be able to tell that I've been playing Tribes Ascend a lot, because I was totally thinking along the lines of Tribe, like building up your momentum. That is an awesome game, by the way, and it's free to play. I highly encourage anybody with a computer who likes first-person shooters and jetpacks to go play Tribes. That was completely off topic. But anyways, yes, this has been Unity3D Tutorials, FPS 1.41. So until my next episode, I'll see you guys later, and keep making games. Alright guys, so there's just one quick thing I want to add to the end of this video. So I just got a comment from the Overdude13, and he said that I should add a damage threshold, or like a different amount of damage to different parts of your body. Like a headshot is an instant kill, torso hurts medium amounts, and arms and legs don't really hurt that much. So that would actually be really easy to do, so let's do that really quickly and just throw it in this episode. So the first thing we need to modify is the enemy body part script, and I'm going to add a variable to it, and I'm going to call it var damage multiplier. I spelled that so wrong, didn't I? Oh well, I don't really care. Alright, and we are going to call this a float, and this is going to by default equal 1. Okay, so that's all we need on that script, and now we need to go to the bullet script, and then all we need to do is copy and paste this line all the way up to here, where normally we would have been getting the variable enemy body, but we're going to change that. So let's multiply, and instead of enemy body, we want to do damage multiplier. Alright, and let's copy and paste that. Paste it there. Alright, now when we apply damage in both of these cases, oh wait, let's actually add it up here too. So control copy and control V. Okay, so now every time instead of applying damage, we are going to multiply damage by the variable damage multiplier, and we are getting the variable hit because that is the raycast hit that we hit in this raycast, and we're going to get the component until we get the script and pull out that variable and multiply it by damage. So now when we go inside of Unity, and I can click on all these different body parts, damage multiplier, I'll leave that by 1, and then the head I want to be in instant kill, so I'm going to change this to 10, and then the arms and legs I don't want to hurt as much, so I'm going to set those to 0.5, so 0.5, and I'm going to select both of these at once, and I'm going to set these to I don't know, 0.3. Okay, and now I want to go to the bullet. So where is my bullet prefab? Where is it? Bullet. Here we go. And damage, I'm going to set this to 0.5. Alright, let's save all of that and give it a test run. So now, let me adjust my gun so that I can shoot it a little easier, because right now it's really hard to aim. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to make them wider, get a better view. Okay, there we go. Make it wider. Alright, that should be good enough. And now I want the zoom angle. I'm going to change this to, I don't know, 30. I think that'll be easier to shoot for a pistol. Alright, now let's see. Yes, that will be a lot easier to test. Alright, so now if I shoot him in the leg, that was cool. Did I shoot him twice? Let's try that again. Alright, I'm going to shoot him once in the leg. Okay, he's not dying yet. He's taking a lot of hits. Why is he taking so many hits? There we go. Oh, it was because he was inside of the AI path door. And that is why. Okay. which is a glitch that we will be fixing in future episodes. As soon as we get the AI done, we are going to be revamping the bullet script. But yes, this seems to be working so far. Every time I'm shooting him in the legs, and headshot should be an instant kill if I can get it. There we go. This guy's actually pretty hard to kill. Damn, even with no weapons, he's pretty relentless. That's just so much fun. Just killing this guy made out of cubes. Alright, so it appears to be working pretty well. The only way to test it, though, is to have good aim. There we go. Actually, you know what? What if I put the game in slow motion? So I'm going to go to Project Settings, Time, and I'm going to do time as 0.3. And let's see if we can do some Matrix kind of style stuff. I did notice that having a rigid body as the character seems to mess up how the slow motion works in this game. Or I don't know if it's the rigid body, but leave a comment below if you can figure out why this particular game doesn't really work very well in slow motion and the camera's pretty jittery. But I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. How many shots does it take to shoot him or to kill him in the leg? Yeah. That was Matrix-like. Okay, so it looks like the code is definitely working. And this is extremely shaky. So I am going to change the time scale right back to 1 where the game works at. And go ahead and save it. So now this has been ET Ski Tutorials FPS 1.41. So until my next episode, I'll see you guys later and keep making games.